Welcome to the Negotiation Club and the Negotiation Podcast. Now, this is where we speak to experts, practitioners, and other technicians in the industry about their negotiation skills, their tactics, what they've done in their negotiations that perhaps we could learn from and practice ourselves. Now, today on the podcast, I have a friend of mine, Martin John. I've known for a couple of years, but Martin has an extraordinary great background, and he can probably explain what that is. So I'm going to hand over to Martin. Martin, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Thank you very much for that introduction, Phil. I'm proud and delighted that you've called me your friend. That makes my heart sing. Thank you very much. And what did you say? An extraordinary and great career or something? 26 years in procurement. For those, I don't know whether you can see this, but I probably look as if I've had 26 years in procurement and a couple of years in supply chain. So automotive, food, tobacco and packaging were the sectors that I've worked in across my career. And now I'm loving what I do in training people in procurement, negotiation, and also ethical influence and persuasion.
Ah, brilliant. Now, of course, you've got the grey hair. I've got no hair, but I do have the grey beard, I guess, as well. Now, we did just have a little chat beforehand in terms of what kind of techniques or what kind of styles we're looking at. And I noticed you might have just used it on me almost immediately. So what is it that we would like to, or what is it that you'd like to maybe share with our audience?
Well, one thing that I found that works particularly well, especially in situations where you don't have much tangible power in a negotiation. So you're looking to maximize your intangible power. And one source of intangible power is to be charming to the other party. And what I found is that this can be a really useful and powerful technique to disarm the other party and also get them to reveal more information than they may otherwise ordinarily do without it.
I love that intangible power position. So the tangible aspect of it, if I get this right, the tangible aspect of it is really the logical elements, the items of the negotiation. But what we're talking about here is very much the personal interaction.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So another intangible power lever would be, say, your body language, the way you carry yourself, the words you use. But being charming, I find works really, really well. And especially I've used it with suppliers where they've been in a monopoly position. So I've had almost zero tangible power whatsoever.
Ooh. Wow. So this particular style, if we were to try and develop it, to try and practice it, to get this charm offensive type style,
Yeah.
this is something that you believe works very effectively when you're in a monopoly position and perhaps maybe you haven't got the type of leverage that you might have if it was a equitable or even you were in a stronger position.
Exactly. So we talked briefly about the Kraljic matrix, didn't we? And if you think about the four boxes of the Kraljic matrix, on the top box, left hand side, well, it depends where you draw it, of course. When the market is very difficult, so there are a few suppliers, high barriers to entry, and you've got relatively low spend, that's the critical box. Okay, so you need the supplier more than they need you. And of course, when you're in that position, they're likely to treat you in a colder way. So you're doing everything you can to try and build goodwill with that supplier, to try and give you a negotiation advantage using intangible power because you have no tangible power. And if we think of the top right-hand box of Kraljic, so that's high market difficulty again, and where the spend is significant, the power is shared typically in that area, and so it's in both parties' interest to collaborate. And of course, because you want to develop and expand the negotiation pie in that box, then it's important also to be charming to get the most out of that counterpart.
That is really interesting. So you're talking about I refer to it as the Kraljic model. I think you have a slightly different pronunciation, but Kraljic model, yeah. So the Kraljic model,
Kraljic.
it's very much a procurement model that's used throughout most
Yeah.
procurement sort
Port
of areas.
portfolio analysis is the
Okay.
other name for it. Easier to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. I'll put a link to perhaps a landing page or something which explains it as well. But it is a model that we use in procurement a lot. And where you're referring to it is in this, as you say, this kind of high risk area. Now, the way I always think about Krautik's model is if you've got a high risk area, high risk supply side, you also then need to do a secondary type of portfolio, which is to consider how the supplier sees you, because the supplier might see you as being hugely important. So even though they're critical, they see you as being important. But if they're critical and they see you as basically a pain, then that's not a great place to be in. And I guess that's where you need to be as charming as you possibly can be.
Absolutely. When you get a mismatch, so that's the supplier preferencing model. So the two bad boxes to be in there are nuisance and exploit. And
Mm.
if you find yourself in either of those boxes and you need a good relationship with those suppliers, you need to do everything you can to convince them that you're a worthy customer and worth them investing their time and resource in. Again, that's where the being charming can come into play.
Okay. Okay. So how do you be charming?
How do you just be yourself, Phil? Just be you.
Have my hat.
Just be you. Well, the first thing I want to say about this is it has to be sincere, firstly.
Yeah.
Because if you're not sincere and whatever you say comes across as being contrived and artificial, then it's really going to blow up in your face. It'll backfire spectacularly. So that's the first thing. But the fundamental thing is, especially when you're meeting someone for the first time, know their name, and if they have an unusual name, ask them how it's pronounced. So you get that right first. That shows that you're interested in them and you actually care about addressing them in the right way. As Dale Carnegie said in his book How to Win Friends and Influence People, the sound of hearing one's own name is the sweetest sound that people can hear. And
That is
so,
absolutely right, Martin John. Yeah.
no
Yeah.
tick.
Now, actually, interestingly enough, Michael Phillips, actually did this particular technique earlier on a couple of weeks ago. So we've actually already got a negotiation card around using your name. So I love the fact that you've just brought this in terms of the charm offensive. So let's say you've actually, you validated, you've got the name right, you maybe even practiced it if it's particularly difficult. But once you've got that right, what's something else you can do in order to sort of enhance the charm effect?
Okay, so many of us who've read and taught negotiation know how important building rapport is in a negotiation in order to get the best results. Countless studies have shown that if you've got rapport, you're more likely to A, avoid deadlock, and B, get a better result if you have a strong sense of rapport. So how do you build a strong sense of rapport? Well, one way is taking a genuine interest in the other party. Okay, so asking a question about them and really listening to the answer, maybe paraphrasing their words back to them as well. So that shows that you're actually listening, you're paying attention to them, you're making them feel like the most important person in the world right at that particular moment. So you might do that. You might do this at the start of your negotiation, where I would absolutely insist that we all spend time, whether it's 5 minutes or whatever, but investing that time to build that rapport and that connection before your negotiation gets underway. And prior
So,
to
so for me, that's it's not it's before you even have the introduction, isn't it? It's like when you just have that chit chat.
yes, yeah, exactly right. And something else you can do, Phil, is do some research on that person beforehand, and find one big rapport builder is identifying a similarity you have with the other person. Okay, and that's easy to do
Mm.
because we all have access to social media and people are publishing their interests, their hobbies, their holidays they've been on. And I'd certainly say that, family and any personal stuff beyond that individual is off limits really. And try and keep the similarities just to that individual you're dealing with until you've maybe built up a relationship over time, and then the counterpart volunteers that information to you, and then it's in play sounds really bad, expression. But then
No,
you've almost been given permission to maybe talk and ask a question on that topic.
yeah, and I absolutely agree with you on that, because I will often listen throughout the entire negotiation. And as you get towards the end of the negotiation, people say what they're going to do or where they're going next. And if you take a note of that, the next time you speak to them, you can say, "Oh, Martin, yeah, the last time we spoke, you said you were going on holiday. How did that go?"
And
But
if
you
it's
can only really do that after you've had that sort of.
yeah, yeah. And again, Phil, it needs to come across in a natural way, not as if you're going through a checklist, in your
Yeah.
complicated CRM system or notebook, as I have, kind of thing. It needs to come across in a natural way, so it's not contrived and creepy.
Yeah. And I'm going to add to that. I think if you look down and say, "Martin, so last time you were on holiday," you'd be like, "Hang on, right, okay."
Yeah.
So that sincerity cannot look like it's a pre-planned piece, and just looking down as if you're reading something could actually do more harm than good,
Yeah,
even though
because
you've got a nice little conversation point.
yeah, I think you're right. So it's really subtle, and it's difficult to get right, and it can blow up in your face spectacularly if you get it wrong. And if the other party
So
perceives you as being, someone who's just desperate to try and find that angle to connect, and using artificial and insincere means to do that.
right, so let's break this down slightly, okay? So we're looking at Martin, John, and the charm offensive here, I think. Okay, so we're going to have a card which is a charm offensive. Okay, so Charming Martin. We could call it
Delighted to
Charming
hear.
Martin, couldn't we?
Delighted to hear.
Charming Martin. I like that one. Okay, anyway, the point is that this is all about building the relationship on a personal level. We've just talked about the fact that you might want to get the name right. You listen early. There is this introductions. There's a personal introductions, which, judging from what you're saying, is just as important as some of the detailed discussions you're going to have later. So that personal aspect, don't just dismiss it. Really listen into what people are saying.
Spot on.
You've also just highlighted the fact that using the Kraljek's model, people tend to be charming when they perhaps feel in a slightly weaker position than perhaps if they're in a really strong, assertive position. So for me to practice, I would like to practice being as charming as I possibly can and seeing if that does help. It's difficult to know exactly how it helps, but I suppose that's a question you can ask the other party after you've done your practice negotiation. But I would also suggest that when somebody is being extremely, extremely charming to the point where they have trolled your Facebook and come up with something personal, don't necessarily dismiss it completely. There is always a reason behind what people do. And if they are being ultra charming, it could lend you the idea that they're not feeling in a very comfortable position themselves.
Exactly. It kind of gives the game away a little bit, doesn't it? That they're not in such a strong position as you might have otherwise thought they were.
I like it. Okay. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, and club members, okay, we have another one to practice now. This is going to be, I think we might call it the Charming Martin. I'm going to close it there. We will send out the links to our audience, those who are following us. It's absolutely great. I'll also send you the information in terms of the new negotiation card. So that will be available as well. And Martin, have you got any final thoughts? Anything you'd like to maybe just add?
Well, I've actually, firstly, I'd like to say I'm honored to have had this opportunity of putting my name or a technique to a card. Thank you very much. But no, think about it. I've used this technique a lot in situations where, I've had very little, zero tangible power because the supplier has been a monopolist in that particular segment I've been dealing with. And if you've got no tangible power, intangible power is the only thing you've got. And, apart from being confident, coming across as confident, using confident body language and the words that you use, being charming can disarm that counterpart and get you a better deal than you would otherwise have had been on the table for you. So it's certainly worth. I benefited from in the past, and I'd recommend others give it a try too.
So it takes practice, as all skills and techniques and tactics take. So certainly for those of you who are listening, think about practicing this one on purpose. If you want somewhere to practice, then of course we have the Negotiation Club. We meet regularly every month. So come along and practice with us. And there's plenty more you can actually do there as well. If you haven't got the opportunity to join us, think about starting your own club. When you practice with others, we guarantee you will be able to improve upon that. So that said, I'm going to leave you all to practice with purpose and enjoy it. Thank you very much, Martin. Take care and
My
stay
pleasure.
charming.
All the best, Phil. Thanks. Bye-bye.